November 1st, 1950. 32,000 feet above the Yalu River, the border between China and North Korea. The sky is clean and brutally cold, the kind of cold that bites through flight gloves and stiffens metal. Sunlight glints off swept wings and polished aluminum as a formation of Soviet-built MiG-15s slices through the thin air. Vapor curls off their wingtips like ghostly contrails. Inside one of those cockpits sits Captain Semyon Fyodorovich, a veteran Soviet pilot on detached duty, his red star carefully removed, replaced with North Korean markings. Officially, he does not exist here. Unofficially, he and dozens like him believe this sky belongs to them. Fyodorovich rolls his shoulders, checking the harness. His Klimov VK-1 engine hums with confidence behind him. The MiG-15 is fast, faster than anything the Americans have deployed so far. It climbs like a rocket, punches hard with a 37mm cannon, and was designed for one purpose: to kill bombers. The briefings in Antung promised easy victories. American pilots, they were told, were aggressive but sloppy. Their jets were underpowered, their formations predictable. Below, contrails appear, long white scars stretching across Korea. B-29s, someone says over the radio, voice tight with excitement. This is why they are here. The superfortress had terrorized Germany and Japan. Now it is back, lumbering through Asian skies, escorted by early U.S. jet fighters. Soviet command believes today will be a demonstration, proof that American air power can be broken. Fyodorovich feels the familiar rush. He adjusts his gun sight and nudges the throttle forward. Then his wingman's voice cracks in his headset. "Contacts! High! Fast!" Out of the sun, shapes dive downward with shocking speed, noses low, wings steady. They do not climb to meet the MiGs. They don't turn early. They wait, and then they fall. F-86 Sabres. Major James "Jabby" Jabara, U.S. Air Force, leans into the dive, G-forces pressing him into his seat. The Sabre trembles slightly as it pushes past Mach 0.9. The MiGs are above him, but only for a moment. Jabara knows this fight. He's been taught to let the enemy believe he controls the sky. The Soviets break formation. It's instinctive. They've been trained for vertical combat, zoom climbs, high-altitude dominance. Fyodorovich pulls up hard, trying to regain altitude, to force the Americans to chase. But the Sabres don't follow. Instead, they slice through the MiG formation like knives. A burst of .50 caliber fire flashes past Fyodorovich's canopy. He jerks the stick left, feeling the controls stiffen further. For the first time since entering Korean airspace, fear creeps in. Not of death, but of helplessness. This is not the fight they were promised. As he limps north toward the Yalu, Fyodorovich looks back once more. High above, contrails crisscross the sky like chalk marks on a blackboard. The Americans are still there, circling, choosing, controlling. By the time he crosses the river into safety, the lesson is already clear. The Soviet pilots entered confident, but the U.S. pilots controlled the fight.
November 1950. Antung Air Base, Manchuria. Captain Semyon Fyodorovich sits on an ammunition crate inside a drafty hangar, helmet resting in his lap. The smell of burned kerosene still clings to his flight suit. Around him, other pilots speak in low, clipped sentences, some angry, some shaken, some completely silent. Mechanics move quickly, counting holes in returning aircraft, shaking their heads. 3 MiGs did not return. In the debriefing room, a map of MiG Alley is pinned to the wall. Red grease pencil marks show where the fight broke apart. Soviet advisors, men who fought the Luftwaffe 5 years earlier, stand with arms crossed. Their expressions are hard, unreadable.
"They did not turn with us," one pilot says. "They dove, fired, and climbed away." "They refused combat," another adds bitterly. The senior colonel corrects him sharply. "No, they chose combat." That distinction matters. The Americans are not afraid of the MiG-15. They respect it, but they understand it. And more importantly, they understand their own aircraft better. Back across the Yalu at Kimpo Air Base in South Korea, Major James Jabara stands next to his F-86, sipping bad coffee from a dented metal cup. The ground crew jokes nearby. Someone chalks a small red star beneath his canopy, unofficial but understood. The Sabre wears its victories quietly. In the briefing hut, U.S. pilots talk freely. No politics, no ideological pressure. They discuss mistakes openly, altitude misjudged, timing off by seconds. Gun camera footage flickers on a white sheet, showing exactly where rounds hit and where they missed. "This is energy fighting," the squadron commander says, tapping the screen. "We don't chase, we don't get slow, we make them react." The Americans have built their entire doctrine around this idea. Speed is life, altitude is money in the bank. Whoever controls both controls the fight. The Soviets, by contrast, are learning in blood. Their training emphasized bomber interception, not fighter versus fighter combat. The MiG-15's heavy cannons are devastating, but only if they hit. Against agile Sabres, firing windows are short, unforgiving. One mistake in timing means overshooting. One tight turn means bleeding speed. And once speed is gone, the Sabre pounces. A week later, the Soviets return in force. December 17, 1950. Clear skies, high altitude. Dozens of MiGs pour across the Yalu, climbing aggressively, determined to seize the vertical. This time, Fyodorovich is ready. He holds formation longer, resisting the urge to break early. He watches the sun, he watches the contrails, and he sees the trap too late. The Sabres don't attack immediately. They linger below, just out of range, letting the MiGs climb higher and higher, burning fuel, narrowing their options. Then, as if on command, the Americans split. Half climb, half dive. The Soviet formation fractures again. Fyodorovich picks a Sabre climbing toward him and fires a long burst. The 37mm shells streak past, missing by meters. The American pilot rolls inverted and dives away, not panicking, not rushing. Fyodorovich follows, and that is the mistake. His airspeed builds too fast. The MiG's controls stiffen like concrete. He tries to pull up, but the nose responds sluggishly. In his peripheral vision, he sees movement. A Sabre slides in from above and behind. The burst is short, precise, deadly. Fyodorovich feels the impact through the airframe. His engine coughs. Smoke floods the cockpit. Training takes over. He jettisons the canopy and ejects, the world exploding into noise and cold. As his parachute opens, he watches his MiG spiral into the frozen hills below. On the ground, Soviet command reaches an uncomfortable conclusion. This is not about bravery. It is not about technology. It is about control. The Americans choose when to fight, when to disengage, and when to return. Their pilots are trained to think independently, to adapt in seconds. Soviet pilots are skilled, but constrained, bound by rigid doctrine and the constant fear of failure under watchful eyes. By early 1951, the scoreboard tells the story no one wants to admit. Kill ratios favor the United States, sometimes 5-1, and the myth of automatic Soviet air superiority begins to crack. February 1951. MiG Alley, Northwest Korea. Winter tightens its grip on the peninsula. The Yalu River freezes into a pale, jagged scar beneath the clouds. At 35,000 feet, the cold is absolute. Fuel thickens, hydraulics groan, breath crystals form inside oxygen masks. This is no longer just a battlefield. It is a proving ground. Captain Semyon Fyodorovich is back in the air. A new aircraft, freshly painted, same red star, same orders, but the tone of the briefings has changed. Soviet commanders now speak less of victory and more of correction. Diagrams cover the walls, Sabre attack profiles, dive angles, firing passes. Words like discipline and coordination are repeated until they lose meaning. Do not chase, the colonel warns. Force them to turn. Fyodorovich nods, though he knows the truth. The Americans do not turn unless they want to. Today, the MiGs climb in layered formations, high cover, mid-cover, low bait. It looks impressive from the ground. The intent is clear. Trap the Sabres between altitudes, crush them from above and below. But the Sabres arrive already knowing the plan. Major Jabara is not flying today. Instead, it's Captain Manuel Pete Fernandez watching the MiGs through his canopy as sunlight flashes off their wings. He counts them quickly. Too many to rush. Perfect. Let them come down, he says calmly over the radio. The Americans stay low, deliberately vulnerable. The MiGs, sensing advantage, begin their descent, one by one, then in groups. The formation stretches, gaps open. Fernandez shoves the throttle forward. The Sabres climb, not straight up, but angled, fast, efficient. They don't aim for the center of the MiG formation, they pick the edges, the isolated, the impatient. Fyodorovich sees a MiG below him erupt in flames before he even hears the gunfire. Another snaps into a spin, pilot fighting the stick as altitude vanishes. The Americans are inside the formation now, invisible seconds ago. He turns hard to engage, forcing the MiG into a tight spiral. For a moment it works. A Sabre flashes past his nose. Fyodorovich fires instinctively. The recoil of the cannon shakes the cockpit. Miss. The Sabre is already gone. Every engagement is like this, brief, violent, and decided before it feels real. The Americans never stay long to be counterattacked. They strike, climb, reset, over and over. On the ground, U.S. radar controllers guide the fight with quiet precision. Calls are short, clear, no shouting, no panic. Bandits high, northbound, Angels 3-5. The Soviet pilots have radios too, but their communications are cluttered, cautious. No one wants to be the first to admit trouble. No one wants to break formation without permission. That hesitation costs lives. By spring, the air war over Korea has evolved. Both sides adapt, but not equally. The Americans rotate pilots home, preserving experience, spreading lessons across squadrons. Tactics improve weekly. Gun camera footage becomes doctrine. The Soviets rotate less. Their best pilots fly again and again, growing exhausted, carrying the weight of losses on their shoulders. When they fall, replacements arrive with fewer hours, less confidence. Fyodorovich notices it in small things, a wingman drifting out of position, a delayed response to a command, a pilot firing too early, too late. April 1951, another fight, another loss. This time it's his closest friend, Lieutenant Alexei Morozov. One moment they are flying wingtip to wingtip, the next Morozov is gone, his MiG torn apart in a single pass, no parachute. That night Fyodorovich cannot sleep. The barracks are quiet except for the wind and the distant sound of engines being tested. He stares at the ceiling, replaying the fight frame by frame. The Americans are not better because they are braver. They are better because they are freer. Free to break off, free to speak up, free to learn from failure without fear. In the sky, ideology means nothing, only decisions do. And more often than not, the Americans are making them first.
June 1951. Dawn over the Yalu River. The sun rises behind the mountains of Manchuria, painting the clouds in soft orange and blood-red streaks. At altitude, the air is smooth, deceptively calm. Below, the war grinds on in mud and smoke. Up here, it is clean, fast, and unforgiving. Captain Semyon Fyodorovich taxis his MiG-15 onto the runway, engine roaring, nose pointed toward the same strip of sky he has crossed dozens of times. But something is different today. The briefing was shorter. The colonel's voice was tight. "We have new orders," he said. "We will force engagement." This is doctrine speaking, not experience. The Soviets plan an ambush, MiGs hidden high above, another group baiting the Americans lower down. The idea is simple: lure the Sabres in, then collapse from above with overwhelming firepower. In theory, it is flawless. In practice, the Americans are already suspicious. At Suwon Air Base, Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski pulls on his helmet and glances at the mission board. He's flown against the Luftwaffe. He's seen confidence shatter before. He trusts patterns more than promises. "They're flying differently," he tells his pilots. "Tighter, more deliberate." That means one thing. "Trap," someone says. "Exactly," Gabreski replies. "So we spring it first." The Sabres approach MiG Alley cautiously, holding altitude just below the suspected ambush zone. They don't rush the bait. They circle. They wait. Minutes stretch. Fuel burns. Nerves tighten. Fyodorovich watches from above, gripping the stick, waiting for the command to dive. His oxygen mask feels heavy against his face. The Americans aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Finally, orders come through. Attack! The MiGs roll over and dive as one. For a brief, beautiful second, it looks like success. The Sabres scatter, contrails breaking apart, American jets diving away. Soviet pilots fire, cannons thundering, shells streaking downward. Then the sky flips. The Sabres don't flee, they separate. Half dive steeply, gaining speed, half climb sharply, using the MiG's own descent against them. The Soviet formation stretches, loses cohesion. Gabreski pulls into a climbing turn, feeling the Sabre respond smoothly, predictably. He crests above a MiG and drops in behind it with ease. A short burst. The MiG disintegrates. All around, the same scene repeats. MiGs overshoot, MiGs stall in vertical climbs, MiGs turn too hard and lose energy. The Americans are not improvising anymore. They are executing. Back at Antung, the loss board grows crowded. Commanders argue late into the night. Some blame aircraft limitations, others blame pilot aggression. No one blames doctrine, at least not aloud. But reality is undeniable. The MiG-15 is a superb interceptor. The F-86 Sabre is a superb fighter. One was built to follow instructions. The other was built to exploit mistakes. Fyodorovich survives the mission, but his aircraft returns riddled with holes. On the ground, a mechanic runs a hand along the torn metal and whistles softly. That was close. Fyodorovich says nothing. By late 1951, restrictions quietly appear. Soviet pilots are ordered not to cross certain lines. Engagement rules tighten.
Risk is reduced, not because the Americans are weak, but because they are strong. In the air, the initiative has shifted permanently. The Americans choose the altitude, they choose the timing, they choose when the fight ends. And the Soviets, once so confident, are left reacting to shadows. October 1951. High above the Korean peninsula, autumn strips the color from the land below, turning hills brown and rivers steel gray. At altitude, nothing changes. The sky remains mercilessly blue, the sun blinding, the cold absolute. This is where reputations are made and unmade. Captain Semyon Fyodorovich climbs slowly now, deliberately. He no longer races for altitude with reckless confidence. Every maneuver is measured, every radio call weighed. Around him, MiGs form up in looser groups than before, pilots spacing themselves not for aggression but survival. They have learned what the Americans want them to learn. Fear creeps in quietly. Not panic, discipline remains, but hesitation. Pilots scan constantly, eyes darting toward the sun, toward empty patches of sky where sabers like to appear. Every contrail could be an attack vector, every shadow could be death. Across the lines, the Americans feel something different: confidence. At Kimpo, pilots joke before missions. They argue about baseball scores and aircraft tweaks. Lieutenant Glenn Eggleston, a World War II ace, tapes a small note inside his cockpit. "Don't get slow." It's half joke, half religion. They know the MiGs are dangerous, but predictable. The Americans have mapped their habits. MiGs climb aggressively. MiGs avoid low-altitude turning fights. MiGs disengage north. So the Sabres exploit those instincts. Today's engagement begins like many others. Radar picks up contacts. Calls are clean, calm. Bandits, Angels 3-8, heading south. The Sabres climb just enough to threaten, never enough to commit. Fyodorovich sees them first, silver flecks against the sun. His instinct screams to attack. His training tells him to wait. Orders crackle in his headset. Hold altitude. The delay costs them. The Sabres dive through the formation, not firing immediately, just passing, close enough that Fyodorovich sees the pilot's helmet, the flash of canopy glass. It's psychological as much as tactical. We are here. We decide. A MiG breaks formation too early. A Sabre peels off after it. Another breaks to cover him. Two Sabres follow. The sky fractures again. Fyodorovich turns to help, but a warning tone screams. His speed is bleeding away. He pushes the nose down, disengaging, hating himself for it. He survives, but survival is starting to feel like defeat. Later in the barracks, the pilots don't celebrate returning. They count who is missing. They speak in quieter voices. No one boasts anymore. The Americans notice the change immediately. They're cautious, someone says during debrief. That means they're losing, Gabreski replies. Air combat is brutal that way. Once confidence cracks, everything slows. Reaction time, aggression, decision-making. The Americans press harder, knowing hesitation is lethal. By 1952, the air war has matured into something cold and professional. Large battles still happen, but fewer MiGs commit fully. The Sabres patrol aggressively, daring them to come down. Fyodorovich receives a transfer order, instructor duty. No ceremony, no explanation, just a quiet removal from the front. On his final flight across the Yalu, he looks down at MiG Alley one last time. Contrails lace the sky like scars that will never fade. The Americans are there, patient, circling, in control. This was never about who had the better plane. It was about who owned the fight. July 27, 1953, Korean Armistice Day. The guns fall silent on the ground first. In the air, patrols still fly, out of habit, out of caution, out of disbelief that the war is actually ending. At 30,000 feet, F-86 Sabres trace familiar orbits, fuel gauges ticking down, pilots scanning a sky that had tried to kill them for 3 years. No MiGs appear. At Kimpo Air Base, pilots remove helmets slowly, almost reluctantly. There is no cheering, just a quiet understanding that something decisive has happened here, something that will echo far beyond Korea. On the other side of the Yalu, Captain Semyon Fyodorovich Sublinin packs his flight gear into a wooden crate. His career will continue. Promotions will come. Official reports will speak of balanced outcomes and heroic resistance. The real lessons will never be printed, but they will be remembered. The Soviets entered the Korean War believing technology and discipline would guarantee control of the sky. They left knowing something far more dangerous existed, a system that trusted pilots to think, adapt, and act independently in combat. The Americans did not win every fight, but they controlled every important one. They chose when to engage, they chose when to disengage. They forced the enemy to react. In air combat, that is dominance. Years later, in different wars, different skies, those lessons will resurface. New jets, new missiles, same truth. The side that controls the fight controls the war.